Somebody asked me about how the astrological generations compare to the more familiar groupings like the Millennials and the Gen Z. It took me a while to actually figure out a way to design a graphic so this becomes kind of obvious, and hopefully this works okay. Here is a timeline showing the generations as they're commonly described. If you see here, we've got Gen Alpha, Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, the Boomers, and even the older ones here. But do you know where these groupings came from, or why these dates in particular are mentioned so often? It's not news that people have always noted that older people see the world differently from the younger ones. The idea of the baby boomers actually came out of the advertising world and marketing demographics sometime after World War II. They had this great idea that they could figure out how to sell stuff to this huge group of young boomers who see the world differently than how their parents saw it. Their parents grew up in the Great Depression. So what about Gen X? Where did that term come from? Now, that was actually the first label that was used for the post-World War II kids. And the name boomer didn't come along till later. Gen X was actually used by a punk rock person, Billy Idol, who used the term Generation X as the name of one of his early bands. The marketing world latched onto the idea from a novel that was written by Douglas Copeland in 1991 called Generation X, Tales for an Accelerated Culture. Copeland defined Gen X as those born in the late 1950s and 1960s. Now, it's interesting that both the novel and Billy Idol's band were looking at dates that matched the astrological Gen X rather than the one that they use today. The ones today were developed by companies like Pew Research. From the beginning, you can see not everybody has agreed on the exact dates of any given generation. So here's the timeline I made of the marketing generations using the most popular dates the most people use for these generations. Currently, they are saying that Gen Alpha ended at the beginning of 2025. And that would mean that anybody born now until 39 will be Gen Beta. The actual end dates, they adjust after the fact because these are based on significant events or social changes that occurred during a certain time period. Here's another timeline for generations. This is what I use for the astrological positions of Pluto. Now, I didn't just make this up. There's a huge body of work supporting this system, and parts of it go back for over 4,000 years. Astrology uses the timing of a planet moving through the zodiac. That's basically how it works. Now, remember that there are often many systems that describe the exact same phenomena. Each one works despite being different from the other systems. For example, most people know about Isaac Newton and that he discovered how to split white light into colors using a prism. You make little rainbows. This is what we know of as RGB light, and it's made of red, green, and blue. Fewer people are familiar with a totally different system about light developed by Johann Goethe. He was born with Pluto in Scorpio back in 1749. And much like modern Pluto and Scorpios, he was interested in perception over theory. And not surprisingly, he was interested in looking to the shades of darkness in order to understand light. His system used color that we now call additive color, and that uses magenta, cyan, and yellow. While Newton's RGB colors are great for creating colors on screens, Goethe's system is used for accurate color in printers. Both systems describe color. The same thing is defined in two different ways, and they both work. Just like this, marketing people and astrologers have systems that describe generations. Astrologers have been doing it a lot longer. The astrology system gives us a vocabulary for many things that English does not even have words for. That's one of the reasons I like it. But anyway, let's get back to our illustration. Here at the timeline of the marketing generations. And up here, you can see the astrological system. Each generation is defined by the astrological definition of what it means when Pluto is in a specific sign of the zodiac. The dates are very clear, as are the meanings. I will mention that I am using Western astrology that uses what is called the tropical zodiac. Think of this instead like a clock. There's 30 degrees for each sign, and it starts from the first day of spring. There are other astrological systems after 4,000 years, such as the Vedic system that comes from India. They use the sidereal zodiac, so the planet position matches the current position of the constellations. That system works too. They just use different definitions for how things relate to each other. So both systems work. If you look here, you can see there's an overlap between the signs that could last 1 to 3 years for Pluto to actually get all the way into the new sign. This is also, this is like retrogrades. You hear this with Mercury. And Pluto does the same thing. It just takes a whole lot longer. And this is also kind of a transition period for society. Yet, even though this looks fuzzy here, if you actually look at natal charts, individuals are born with Pluto either in one sign or the other one. And so, but they're during this transitional period. The marketing generations also have these fuzzy edges based on differing approaches to the demographics and different opinions. If you look in Wikipedia, there's even a page for cuspers, which defines just some of the expert opinions that vary widely on when these generations begin and end. Each one is fully justified, and each of our experts are equally qualified. I've added these alternative dates to our graphic of the marketing generations. Now, you can see I've color-coded this in hopes that this will make it a little more obvious how everything matches. For example, look here at the end of Gen X and the beginning of the Millennials. There are names like Millennials or the Oregon Trail generation that are used for people who don't feel like they really belong to Gen X or the Millennials. Now look up here at the astrology timeline. Pluto actually changed signs during this disputed time period. Early Gen X were born with Pluto in Virgo, and late Gen X and early Millennials were born with Pluto in Libra. And those who feel most like they're Millennials were actually born with Pluto in Scorpio. The most recent generations match closely with the Pluto dates. You can see that here. And societal changes have been faster. And this has been a time where Pluto spent maybe only 12 years in a sign during like Pluto in Libra and Pluto in Scorpio. It was slower before, and it's slowing down again. And you can see that the generations in both systems are lasting longer. Now, the biggest difference between these two systems is with the boomers. The marketing version started after World War II. This is the baby boom after the war. The astrological version begins when Pluto went into Leo. So it would cover everybody who does not really remember World War II. But you'll notice that most of our rock stars of the era Like the Beatles, Rolling Stones, all of them came from the Pluto and Leo generation. And the time period ends about the same time that was described in the Douglas Copeland book. The late boomers, now referred to as Generation Jones, were born just as Pluto entered Virgo. Now take a look if I put all three of these timelines together: the astrological dates, the disputed cusper dates, and the dates of the marketing generations. Are these systems the exact same thing? No. But as you can see, there are some uncanny similarities. What do you think? Tell me in the comments. I'd really be interested to hear your feedback on this. The most important thing here is not the dates, but that these similarities extend to observations about human behavior over time. This is the topic I'm exploring. Over the series, I will show how knowing about your generations and the other ones is far more than just another source of, hey, my generation is awesome and your team sucks. In answer to the original question, do I know what I'm talking about, when I identified Benjamin Franklin as a boomer? Yes, I do know. I'm using a different system to discover new ways to understand ourselves and the changes that are happening in our world right now. Check out my first two videos for a brief introduction to this series and my approach to this material. Please like and subscribe to help me build this channel, and also there are some links below to my website that will help you find out about upcoming webinars that dig much deeper into this topic.